everyone. Welcome to the Zoom webinar, which is going to launch the What Works Here report from the Citizens Advisory Council. I'm just going to give people a minute or two to join. We have a full house, and I am enormously excited and appreciative that so many of you are interested in this work. And I think it's a great affirmation and appreciation of all of the work that citizens, members of the public are putting in on all our behalves to help shape this strategy. So let's get started, because we've got such a lot to pack in. Welcome all of you to this webinar, this Zoom webinar that is launching the What Works Here inquiries, the work that the Citizens Advisory Council has been doing on behalf of DEFRA, the Food Strategy Advisory Board, to contribute to the development of the good food cycle. First of all, we're going to hear from Charlotte Baker, Director of the Agri-Food Chain in DEFRA, just to remind us of the context in which all this takes place. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for inviting me here today. So my name is Charlotte Baker. I am, as Sue said, the Director of the Agri-Food Chain in DEFRA, which is officially the best job in government. And I'll tell you a bit about why, because I think that's important context for what we're discussing today. So food matters, right? It matters economically, socially, environmentally, and personally. And it's one of the few systems that touches every household, every community, every day. It's how we celebrate, commiserate, comfort eat, keep our bodies healthy. It's a system that's worth more than 130 billion to the economy, 4 million jobs, and it spans farms and factories, laboratories, regulators, retailers, government, everything from superstores to corner shops to everything in between. And the reason that I love this job, and it's the best job in government, is that every conversation I have starts with food. And that is something that is deeply personal. So you can be in the middle of a very serious meeting with the most senior politician, and you can be talking about, say, Weetabix, and suddenly we're talking about someone's kid's breakfast routine. And it's a reminder that we are working on something that is just deeply human. And it's human because we all need to eat. Too many people, sadly, cannot access that basic essential. And we also need to be able and deserve to be able to eat good quality, healthy food. So one of the things that was absolutely no surprise to me in the findings of this report is that people care about good food regardless of their background or their social economic status. It is something that is important to all of us. So the main thing that I wanted to say is a huge thank you to everyone for being part of that, however big or small, whether you were involved in the report or you're turning up today. Of course, particular thanks to the Citizens Advisory Council for the report, which captures really brilliantly what communities are already achieving and highlights just the sheer potential for local food systems to be a part of driving that real change. I want to say a big thank you to the Food Foundation and the Food Farming and Countryside Commission for their hard work, expertise and support in delivering this programme of work, but also working in partnership with us in government. It's not always easy, but we really, really value it. I know a group of the council came to see Minister Eagle back in March, and I can tell you that when she came out of that meeting, she was absolutely buzzing with just getting just the sort of real feedback from people who are experiencing the food system every day. That was something deeply motivating for her. And she came out really enthusiastic. And that enthusiasm is what we want, right, from our politicians and our policy makers. We want them to be enthusiastic and we want them to understand. We have got a new minister, as ever, the change continues. but he is already really enthusiastic about the opportunity to make an impact on this brief. So we look forward to taking to him the outcome of this report and getting him engaged in its findings. And I generally want to emphasise just quite how important it is for policymakers to hear that citizen voice in policy making. One of the things, or the sort of central aim of the good food cycle, is to build a food system that's fairer, healthier, more sustainable. This gives us such a strengthening of our evidence base to underpin that work. And it's already directly feeding into some of our thinking about how we can support improved access to affordable and healthy food in local areas. So a huge thank you to everyone involved. Thank you for coming here today to hear this conversation, to engage in the report, and to be part of something that is deeply important to us all. And I look forward to hearing what's said in the panel session later. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you for joining us. And I guess want to remind us all that this is part of a bit of a history of DEFRA engagement with citizen-centred food conversations. When we were running our food conversation over the last 3 years, all ministers have been really enthusiastic about engaging with citizens. I know the Food Foundation has the same experience with their group of food ambassadors. And those two sets of citizens, those who've worked with us on the food conversation, those who work with the Food Foundation as food ambassadors, are coming together in the Citizens Advisory Council with a real sense of collaborators in solving a shared problem. This is about how can we fix a thing that we know is difficult, we know it's complicated, and yet this shared commitment to work on this problem has really shaped the engagement that we've had with DEFRA for really the last 3 years. And so these What Works Here inquiries is building on something that DEFRA has been quietly leading on, and we really appreciate that. And I think the point that Charlotte's making is everybody has a stake in food. Everybody cares about food and food systems. It matters to all of us. Also helps that engagement with politicians and policymakers, because for citizens in the Citizens Advisory Council, but the citizens we've been meeting all around the UK in these projects can also connect to their own local MPs. Local MPs get this work. They understand the materiality of it, how important it is to their constituents, to voters, and to members of the public that they meet. So it's a real connector. It's a real connector in the relationship between citizens, politicians and policymakers. And, without being too kind of grandiose about it, it's kind of at the core of democratic renewal, how vibrant our high streets and our economy can be. But we'll hear a lot more about that shortly from the citizens themselves. But I'm just going to say just a tiny bit more about why we think the design of this process, the What Works Here inquiries, was so important to sit alongside the Food Strategy Advisory Boards and the other mechanisms that DEFRA has to shape the good food cycle. So one of the things that we come up with a lot is the need to confront what I often call the toxic old tropes, the narratives that shape how we think about food and food systems. And they kind of show up in all sorts of ways. Things like, look, we can't tell people what to eat. Nobody wants a nanny state. Look, people just care about cheap food. Those are the sorts of taken for granted lines that we heard, repeated over and over again about food and food systems change. And yet we knew, and Food Foundation knows, lots of our other colleagues working in this space know that that's not our experience when we're working with citizens. And so what we wanted to do was to invite citizens in directly to think more about the system as it is at the moment, how it could be different, and what they wanted to say directly to politicians and policymakers when asked. So it was really exciting that DEFRA took the initiative and set up a Citizens Advisory Council and brought it into the heart of that policy-making process. And working with them, I think we've created a policy process that is in fact, pretty groundbreaking. So Citizens Advisory Council is a proper cross-section of the nation. It's weighted a little to hear the seldom heard voices, and I think that's exactly right. So we're bringing those seldom heard voices centre stage alongside a really good cross-section of people with all sorts of backgrounds, interest and experience into the process. And it's rooted in a really strong tradition of participatory and inclusive research. So in this case, citizens are not just coming together to share their own lived experience. Of course, that's really, really important. They're in this process as researchers, as citizens researchers. And because they come to the process afresh, they're able to ask really good questions, fresh questions, the things that often institutions stop noticing or stop seeing or stop remembering to ask. And they're able, of course, then to talk about the things that they really care about, that really matters to them. And you'll see how that shows up in the body of the report. And just finally, I just want to appreciate again DEFRA for being really quite bold in the way it's going about shaping policy. I'm getting requests from countries as far afield as New Zealand and Australia, the Nordics, to talk to them about how we're doing this. They're really interested in how this is working. In preparation for the G20 summit, we're talking about how to bring citizens' voices through every country in that process. And as luck would have it, it sounds as though the incoming administration, if it all goes ahead as it seems to be, are really supporting our ambitions for a fairer, greener, more prosperous country that really takes food seriously. So this is a really exciting moment, and it's a really timely moment. And isn't it great that when the moment comes, we have the material that's ready for it? So we've got some citizens here on the call today for you to hear from, but there are lots of others involved in the process. And so I'm just going to run, I love saying this, we're going to run the VT, those of you who are old enough to understand what the heck that means. So you can hear from those citizens who aren't here today, but who've been part of the process. So let's run that film, and then then Mhairi will talk a little bit more about the findings of the report.
I wanted to become a part of the council because I have experiences of being in food poverty and I want to make a change.
A lot of us come from different backgrounds. I started this because it was about my son.
I want my kids and my grandchild to have a healthy diet.
My daughter was unwell with an eating disorder, and obviously the impact of food and nutrition has been very close to my heart.
That's what the CAC does. It brings people from different backgrounds with different experiences.
This has not been tokenistic. It's been actually listening to what we have to say on how things are done and how things could be done.
Citizens do want to contribute to a good food system, and they are much more collaborative, and they are ready to bring solutions.
As an advisory council together, I think everybody's pretty open. We've got the knowledge, the experience, the on-ground support. We're willing to do whatever it takes.
And that's a very rich source to tap into, especially when you're trying to put together something or improve existing policy that could affect everybody. So we're like walking, talking encyclopedias.
Great. Over to you, Mhairi, so that you can sum up the highlights of the report.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to be here. I am Mhairi. I am Head of Food Futures at the Food Farming and Countryside Commission, and I've been leading the write-up of the Citizen Advisory Council's What Works Here inquiries in their new report From the Ground Up, published today. I'm just going to give you an overview of their findings and recommendations. So as part of their What Works Here inquiries in Cornwall, Liverpool, York and North Yorkshire and the northeast of England, citizens met more than 80 people, from mayors and local authorities to farmers and fishers to food businesses and community food projects, exploring what works in food in that region and what stands in the way. As citizen researchers, they brought their own experience of the food system to investigate what works and gathered field notes, videos and reflections, and we worked with them to bring all of that data together. To help the analysis, we used the Citizen Value Framework. As we were hearing their findings, it was clear that what they saw working had a different kind of meaning for them. And the Citizen Value Framework builds on the approach to public value pioneered by UCL's Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. It reframes how economic value of the food system is assessed. Typically, that's measured in quite narrow terms in terms of products sold or profits, but those measures actually capture only part of the picture and can miss what citizens actually want food to deliver. So the framework organises these priorities into 4 values. We've got economic and financial value, which means transparent, diverse and a fair food economy. Individual value, where everyone has nourishing and affordable food. Social value, meaning vibrant food cultures, strong communities, and the protection of institutions and spaces where people meet to enjoy food. And environmental value, meaning sustainable, resilient, and responsible systems. And there were many examples of where that value is being delivered across the country right now. This is just a snapshot. So for economic and financial value, we saw this in Cornwall. We met farmers at Prethingall and Ennisbarton Farms who are part of cooperatives where they set their own prices, and this gives them stability. For individual value in Liverpool, we met Food for Thought, which is a not-for-profit caterer providing 26,000 meals every day to over 80 schools, providing good food and working with children, parents and teachers to get the best food possible to children at lunch. For social value, we saw that delivered in the Northeast with the Oswin Project, which is a prison employability programme where former offenders are employed at the charity's cafes, farm shops and market gardens, and people currently employed by the charity describe the purpose it gives them and their hope for the future. And environmental value, at Yoke Farm in North Yorkshire, we met Emma and Ben Mosey, who reduced their flock from 6,700 hens to just around 750. The prices for selling eggs, the prices set by supermarkets, made their business unviable. And so they were able to diversify their business and connect with their community in a different way. But although these regions were very different, the same 5 barriers were holding back this work everywhere. We heard about supply contracts that really load risk onto farmers and undermine UK grown produce. We heard many farmers and businesses who want to supply food to public institutions, but public procurement is really set up to favour larger businesses. Many organisations responding to the unique needs of their region are running on short-term and insecure funding. The loss of physical infrastructure like abattoirs means that food produced in a region then needs to leave that region to be processed. And across much of the work being done, there is an over-reliance on unpaid labour and redistributed surplus food to keep things going and keep people fed. Regional leaders and experts that the Citizen Advisory Council met pointed to many solutions that would go some way to keeping their work running. And at a regional level, that's funding local food partnerships to support the collaboration and relationships that really get things done in the region, devolving power and budget so that regions can develop their own food plans and act on them with long-term funding plans. Rebuilding that physical food infrastructure to keep much more value in the region, and giving councils enhanced planning powers so that good food from that region has a place on high streets. At a national level, reforming public procurement and making supply contracts fairer for farmers, for fishers, growers, and for citizens. Using honest and transparent labelling to stop issues such as companies using fake farms to sell their products. And joined up food legislation so that rules and standards work together to create the conditions for good food everywhere and stop value being eroded. So that is just an overview of the report. Please do have a read of the full report and do send us any feedback you have on that. We'd love to hear what you think. And do watch the films of the council carrying out their inquiries in each region, which are available on our websites. And with that, I'm going to hand to Anna and our panel.
Brilliant job, Mhairi. Thank you so much. It's really great to see it all captured so succinctly. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna. I'm the Chief Exec at the Food Foundation. I'm really delighted now to bring it in the panel who are going to discuss the findings in a little bit more detail. So we have two members of the Citizens Advisory Council, Dominic and David Njoku, who are both going to talk about it. And we have Keenan who runs Feeding Liverpool and was one of the people that the council spoke to when they did the inquiry in the Liverpool region, and has been thinking a lot about citizen involvement, both in Liverpool as well as part of the wider national picture. So we'll be hearing about the process sort of from two different angles in that sense. So thank you three so much for giving us your insights today. It's brilliant to have you with us. Dominic, I think we're going to start with you. Hopefully your camera is okay there. Yeah, we can see you. Super. Hey, great. Hiya, nice to see you. Do you want to just kick off by telling us a bit about how it's felt to be part of this process, and a little bit about you've got so many different roles in food research, in academia, as an activist, as an ambassador for the Food Foundation in particular. But this role was a little bit different, wasn't it? And do you want to tell us a little bit about what you got out, how you felt about the process and how this was different from other areas of your work?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think it brought together a lot the Citizens Advisory Council, and as was noted in that short film that was played just earlier, that it brought together people from all different areas or statuses of society, and also different food environments. And one of the real strengths, though, that I would say that was achieved by the Food Foundation and the FFCC was that the range of people that you brought together to speak with us and for us to be heard by, from farmers to retail to academics to food aid support mechanisms and organizations, but in a way where knowledge exchange between the two was possible. And yeah, I would feel the need, though, to highlight as well that for me, being able to speak about the food environment that I live in and that I've raised my amazing daughter in, having the Citizens Advisory Committee as part of that felt important, because, and as I've hopefully tried to highlight in our From the Ground Up report, that in my council estate you can buy blueberry vapes but not a punnet of blueberries. And so we have access to like flavor but not really nutrition. So to me, that's not just a story about choice. It's kind of like a window into who the current food system serves and the places and communities that it continues to overlook. And I think that being able to have my voice heard in that as well was a real pleasure.
Well, thanks, Dominic. As ever, you kind of capture such a massive point in a little example there about the blueberry vapes. It's very powerful. Just tell us a little bit about what you attended the inquiry in Yorkshire, I think. Do you want to just tell us what you took away from that? What did you learn from that?
There was I was trying to recall because there were so many, and I'm not great with names at the best of times, but there were so many different people we met over the couple of days we were there, and learned how that local food system really helps different elements of that community begin to flourish. And I think and credit to you guys, we also had the ear of the mayor and this is
David
another,
Skay.
believe it or not, I'm doing a PhD in geography, but I still don't know if it's Yorkshire, or North Yorkshire, but it was that area.
Yeah.
And
there are 3 mayors for Yorkshire, so I
so
think he's North, but I actually have to check that myself. David Skay,
sure.
you're talking about, aren't you?
Yeah, and I thought that he was able to express the victories of that local food system and what it was delivering. And it's a stark difference to what communities like mine, and I travel up and down the country with, thank you for mentioning my research, but to different council estate communities from Darlington to Lincoln to all over the country. And we often survive off what is being called convenience store food environments, or as we called it, the estate shop, where that nutrition is not easily accessed. So I guess it showed to me how working together in that area, they began to be able to make a change. Because in the daily lives of people in this estate and other estates across the country, as I said, it feels like the food system is working, but just not for us.
Thanks, Dominic. Let's move on to David. David, why don't perhaps you could set out why good food is so important. I mean, what did you pick up through the inquiries and the conversations that you had about what needs to change in order to enable us to all get access to that good food?
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. So I best start by introducing myself. My name is David Njoku, and I work as a computer programmer in Bracknell in Berkshire. And in my work, my day job has nothing to do with food. And so it's been such a privilege to meet with people from farmers to heads of industry to politicians to cabinet ministers to talk about this and to learn from them. One thing I have heard and one thing I have learned is, people talk about tons of this import, export container ships and all the imported logistics that go behind getting food on our table. And that makes sense because obviously a workforce marches on its stomach. But then when I went back to the meetings with the other citizens, the tone changed. And I noticed the citizens talk about food. It wasn't about facts and stats. It was in poetry because I think normal people, we have, not saying politicians aren't normal, but the ordinary people, we have such a different relationship to food. When we look at a plate of food, we're not just looking at 2,000 calories. We're looking at something that ties us back to our history, to our tradition, to who we are, to our communities, to our aspirations, to who we want to be. When I put a plate of food in front of my children, I am not just feeding them, I'm basically telling them that this is who we are, this is how we, the Njokus of Bracknell, want to present ourselves to the world. And I was thinking of something the other day. Last week, I went to a store in town here and I bought a bag of chickpeas. Um, there's a lady, the woman behind the counter, she's Filipino, and she said to me that, oh, her husband, who is, I think she said Indonesian, that when he cooks his chickpeas, he cooks it in coconut milk. And when I came home and tried it and cooked chickpeas in coconut milk, in that moment, I wasn't being more Indonesian or more Filipino. It made me a bit more British. And that's what I think we as citizens brought to this conversation, the poetry behind food.
Thank you, David. That's incredibly powerful. And your point around how food somehow in the policy conversations can get reduced to such a narrow, through in such a narrow lens, thinking about it sort of solely in its economic role. Did you pick up, tell us a little bit about what you heard. You were also in Yorkshire, I think, weren't you? Tell us a bit about, what you picked up. Did you feel you saw some examples of what a system that really delivers food in giving all of these sort of manifold benefits to communities? Did you see some examples of that?
I did. I remember, as Dominic said, we met so many people, and my memory's as bad as his. But one person that did stand out to me, we met a pig farmer. Her name was Anna. I think it was from a place called Anna's Trotters, but I might be wrong. And the passion with which she spoke really impressed me. She got into details about running a pig farm, and she talked really knowledgeably about the legislation and all of that governs the work she does. But then at the same time, she talked about meeting with school children, about the passion she has to bring on the next generation, to educate children on what goes into our food. And it just seemed, I was really impressed by the fact that she was able to hold these two things that to me seemed contrasting. She was able to hold both in her mind and be passionate about both of them equally.
Thanks. That's a lovely example. And I think there are many more, aren't there, like that in the report, of people who are up and down the country, innovating, trying to hold, and what Mhairi talked about, all these different forms of value together in what they're doing, so that they can be bringing, forming part of this food system at local level, which is delivering so much more for our communities. Did you want to say anything about some of the barriers that they face? Some of those, I mean, Mhairi talked a little bit about it in the report, but there were quite a lot of consistent findings, weren't there, across the regions about some of the barriers that those different initiatives face in actually making the model work or getting to the scale that they want to get to or meeting their ambition.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this. It almost seemed as if some of the barriers could fit into two categories. There were barriers of logistics and geography. I mean, Yorkshire is huge, and so the farmers consistently told us about how they would have the difficulty in moving produce from one place to the other. Like Mhairi said, maybe going to abattoirs or wherever they need to get their food to. I mean, there are just the natural barriers of geography that I'm sure can be overcome. But there were also the barriers of legislation where sometimes it seemed they thought legislation was getting in their way, and sometimes in other cases they thought that legislation wasn't getting behind them enough.
Interesting. Thank you. That's really helpful. Let's move to Keenan. So Keenan, you're running Feeding Liverpool, and you were one of the people that the Citizens Advisory Council met when they did their inquiry in the Liverpool region. tell us a little bit about how it felt to be part of the inquiry.
Well, I mean, firstly, I thought it was a brilliant opportunity for us as a region and as a city and leading Liverpool's Food Alliance. Just a fantastic opportunity to input into national framework, shaping the strategy that's going to shape how people live their lives in Liverpool, Merseyside and beyond. So that was really fantastic. I felt proud of the partners who delivered the work. And that was just the tip of the iceberg, the work that's happening in Merseyside. But I felt incredibly proud as Feeding Liverpool, as a representative organisation, that we can convene these partners and coordinate this work across a city footprint and increasingly across a city region. But also optimistic, because I think, as Dominic and David have alluded to, people know their places better than anyone else, and we experience that across the city footprint. People in neighbourhoods, in council wards, they know the reality of their food environments and their lived experiences better than I ever could, as somebody who has a citywide remit. So I felt it was just right that this work was happening to inform national strategy, which I really strongly feel should knit together local context, regional contexts, and provide an example for everybody to follow. But there should be continued collaboration with people in place to make sure the strategy is delivered in a way that works for people. Yeah, just overriding feeling was complete pride that Liverpool was being represented in a national conversation. Grateful to the Food Foundation, Food Farming Countryside Commission and the citizens for everything that they brought to the 2 days. But then just really optimistic that this actually feels like it's going somewhere. And, you know, as an organisation that long before I came into the organisation has been championing people from our place. Yeah, it felt great that was that seemed to be the direction of travel happening through this piece of work.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, and I know you know, your region is really at the forefront of trying to bring together lots of different actors who are forming part of this good food cycle at local, regional level. So tell us about where that's going next, that work in the Liverpool City region.
Yeah, so we've just completed a food systems mapping research project across the city region, working with the Combined Authority, which aims to connect different boroughs within the region more effectively to tackle food system issues. Liverpool, as a city within the region, is much more advanced. We've had a food partnership for a number of years now, and Feeding Liverpool as a convener of that, working closely with the local authority. But we really want to see collaboration across the region to maximise the impact of the work that we're doing, and also to really get into the nuances of local contexts, because Sefton and Knowsley are very different to Liverpool, and St Helens and Hull very different to Wirral. So yeah, that's a piece of work that hopefully lead to more greater collaboration across the region. Liverpool Food Alliance is about to relaunch a good food plan, which we've had in place for 5 years now. So we're moving on to the second phase of that. The first goal on that good food plan, and I think probably the most important one, and it relates directly to this piece of work, is supporting and enabling citizens' participation in the work we do. I think developing food citizenship is not really a problem when people are given the opportunity to engage in a way that works for them. So whilst we do want to look at sustainability, we do want to look at health outcomes, we do want to look at building a good food economy, we want to engage citizens in a really meaningful way. And as part of that, we're essentially going to try and lift something that looks very much like the Citizens Advisory Council and develop a piece of work around a citizen food council and a youth food council in the city region. I think Feeding Liverpool as an organisation and as a food alliance has been very effective at storytelling, which I think is incredibly important to a lot of the work we do, particularly around food insecurity, making that a real sort of key issue at the forefront of people's minds. And I think we're getting there as a country, and it is becoming more prominent in conversations. But I think we need to go beyond that and meaningfully engage citizens in finding solutions. And something that I found really, really useful about the inquiry in Merseyside was the challenges that we had from the Citizens Advisory Council. I think when you do this work for long enough and you get used to the barriers that you face and they frustrate you, but you're sort of used to the working conditions that you're operating within. And I think that some of the questions we got, even as simple as, well, why not? Why can't you do something? I think Sue alluded to this at the start. It challenges your perceptions and it sort of really then doubles down on your ambition to do something really impactful and meaningful. And that's something that we want to build into proper governance structure within Food Alliance in Liverpool, but also across the city region to make sure that it's representative of local contexts.
Thanks, Keenan. That's super exciting. I mean, wouldn't it be kind of amazing if we had a kind of embedded citizen advisory council in DEFRA, in central government, and we had it kind of mirrored in the major regions around the country and sort of directly feeding in so that citizen voices were really embedded at local, regional and national level. I'm actually taken back to how they set up their huge sort of zero hunger program in Brazil. It was exactly as that. Sort of each of the big provinces had these huge citizen assemblies that fed into a council at the national level. It was a formal, incredibly but very dynamic process of really involving citizens and community-based organisations in the policy development process. And you're starting to develop a vision for something a bit like that, I think. We're going to move on now to questions and bring in some questions from those who've been listening in. Thank you so much, Keenan. I'm going to direct the questions to some of you on the panel there, and it might be possible, it might be that we bring in also the wider team where needed, so if everyone could be ready to sort of jump in. It would be good to first, this is quite a specific question from Bill Grayson, which is, how did farmers contribute to the CAC report? He's also asking whether any of the sessions were recorded, but I'm quite sure that in the Yorkshire region, you heard from farmers. I don't know, Dominic, would you like to come in and just give us a little illustration of that? Are you still there, Dominic?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You're there.
Yeah, there were definitely farmers involved in the 2 days. And particular, now I'm remembering, and I shouldn't have forgot because it was the best scrambled eggs I'd ever had in my life. It was a yolk farm. I hope I'm saying it right. It's spelt differently, but yeah. And I really saw how they cared. Like they saw their farm as kind of a point or a vehicle to help the families surrounding be able to access good food. And it went even deeper than that. There was a space for families to play and learn, and yeah, so it was deeply integrated to all the sharing that happened during our trip. And yeah, and I think farmers are, yeah, if it's okay to say, I spoke 2 years running at Oxford Farming Conference, both 2025 and 2026. And it's refreshing to see, because I'd never met a farmer before before 2025, but how they really held such a passion after I spoke and came off stage, like the amount of farmers that wanted to speak to me because of the passion and pride that they put into the produce that they grow, that they feel so deeply that it should be connecting to communities like mine, where yeah, as I've said, fresh food is non-existent, while ultra processed food is everywhere and marketed to us. So yeah, I guess I like to try and just recapping very briefly is at Oxford Farming Conference, I show the 4 photos of my council estate that actually the Food Foundation asked me to take like some photos of my food environment. as part of the Broken Plate Report 2025. And what I realized is that these visuals of like my pay-as-you-go electric meter, the shop on my estate, the bus stop where the bus ready shows up, and the council block that has black mold everywhere, it really speaks to what is often unseen. And so how, in a way, this speaking to the good food cycle and the citizens' engagement is we're able to talk about what is often not visible to policymakers and decision makers. And I think that hopefully that has an impact. And it's not just that this is a thought up like over the past couple of months or weeks, is that I think I'm trying to express that there's been a kind of legacy of the Food Foundation and FFCC trying to engage voices like mine. And even like I got to speak at the House of Lords, and small victories get quoted in their UK recipe for health report. So I think that it's been a lot of work has got us to this stage, if you get what I'm saying. And I think, long may it continue.
Thanks, Dominic. Let's move on to Rushda's question. I'd like to put this to you, David. She asks, how can policy shift the focus from changing individual behaviour to changing the environment that shapes people's choices? Do you want to make some comments on that based on what came out of the inquiry?
That's something I'm really, really passionate about, because I agree. It's so easy to talk a lot about individual behavior, individual preferences, and in truth, I strongly believe that every time someone talks about the individual, it's an abdication of duty. Anyone who says to you, well, that person over there decided to spend their money on I don't know, poor food rather than eat another broccoli or something. Every time someone says that, you're looking at somebody who has decided they do not want to help, they do not want things to change. And what we tried to do in Citizens Advisory Council was make that point really strongly, because we are a democracy, and it would be very easy for powerful interests to try and attempt to bully the government into doing nothing by accusing them of wanting to be a nanny state or taking, I don't know, people's blueberry vapes away from them or whatever it is. And so we try to strongly put the opinion of the citizens in front of DEFRA, in front of the government, to say, no, actually, we do believe that the situation we're in now calls for legislation that assists people in making good choices.
Thank you, David. I want to just stick with you for a second, if you don't mind, and that's to pick up the question which has got 6 votes on. I've just spotted the voting thing on that's Dan Crosley's question. So he basically asks, how can we make sure that what you're pushing for in the report actually gets acted on by government, and then also, fed back to the Citizens Advisory Council. Do you have thoughts on that?
I do have a few. I've been on a bit of a journey with this, because when I started, I was really hopeful, thinking, oh, we got all these diverse voices into a room, and it was all great. And then I remember, I don't know if it's a year or 2 ago, went to these workshops at DEFRA, and they said to us, well, actually, this work we're doing, 10 years ago, another group had done something similar, and 10 years before that, another group had done something similar. And it seemed that nothing ever goes anywhere, which I have to admit made me a bit despondent. But they followed that up by saying, what we're doing this time is we're not in the past, each time we went back to square one and pretend that the previous things previous reports hadn't been written and start from the start. But this time, what they're doing is they're taking everything that's happened in the past into account, and we're starting not from square one, but I don't know, square five. And I have been impressed in the meetings I've sat in and the conversations I've had. I have been impressed by the willingness and what seems very much like the determination to see this through. And
yeah, excellent. Well, that's good. And I think as the food strategy process sort of takes shape, I think it's going to be really important to make sure that some of your key conclusions around the local and regional food systems, which are bubbling up in communities where you've got so many passionate individuals who are really wanting to make this work and need more enabling conditions for it to be possible, for that good food that you've talked about to be really accessible for everybody. We need to make sure that all of those examples are really living in the heads of the civil servants and ministers as they're making decisions and developing policy proposals in the coming months. Thank you, David, very much. I think we've run out of time now, so I am going to just hand over to Sue to wrap us up. I think what I really took from all of your comments, and thank you so much, David, Keenan, and Dominic, was really how much experience, knowledge, insight, and passion there is that doesn't get, as you say, much airtime in national policy conversations. And what you've done so effectively is tell those stories. And I would really urge everyone to read the report, because it's a very powerful set of examples of all the sorts of things that we need to be enabling much more of. I know we didn't talk much about public procurement, but that comes out as a pretty major theme, as a sort of missed opportunity. It was talked about in Mhairi's summary, a missed opportunity for really fueling that good food cycle. If we can get the public procurement buying the right kinds of things from these local and regional food systems, then it starts to create those economies of scale that make everything else possible. So keeping that in mind as a sort of central pillar, really, of one of the areas where policy can really progress much more quickly. But I think overall, the really unique insight that you all have brought, you in combination with all of these individuals, leaders, institutions, change makers at local level, combined, sort of see the challenge with clarity and grounding it in the human experience, which you also beautifully described in your comments. So thank you so much for all you've done so far. I know DEFRA is incredibly grateful, and we're really committed to make sure that the work is acted upon as much as possible. So let's hand over to Sue now.
Thank you, Anna. I mean, we hear a lot, don't we, when we're bouncing around government about the need to work in systems and to break down silos. In fact, we heard a lot about that again yesterday in Andy Burnham's speech in the North. We heard a lot about breaking down silos. We heard a lot about moving out of Westminster and Whitehall and into regions and into places. It's almost as if we had anticipated that in the whole way that we designed this process, because this could not speak more into that new agenda if it had been designed with that in mind. One of the things that I really love about working with our citizens, this particular group, all of the citizens that we work with, all the members of the public that we work with, is that they just cut through a lot of the kind of chat, the policy wonk chat, and just describe how they have to navigate systems every single day of their lives. They join the dots in ways that policymakers or policy wonks or even academics often find it hard to do. They completely understand what it takes to, afford your rent and to work out, your transport costs, or work out how you can do a big shop if you haven't got a car that's working at the moment and the Tesco is out of town and miles away. How you can kind of persuade your kids not to keep drinking the high energy drinks when their adverts crowd out their environment. That's part of their everyday lived experience. And they come at these questions with some really simple and honest and really authentic questions. How come this happens? And how can government act more on our behalf, on the public's behalf, to shift systems that are self-evidently not working for us anymore? But they come at it not just in that problem diagnosis, but wanting to know, well, what works? What can we do? We don't want to talk about the problem. We want to talk about the solutions. And you will see in the report, when you have a chance to read it, and in fact, the separate reports that capture citizens' insights from each of the places that all contributed to this overarching report, you will see it full of practical solutions, practical ideas. We sometimes call them the JFDI policy solutions, which everybody kind of agrees with. And public procurement, as Anna just said, is absolutely one of them. The case for sorting out public procurement has been made over and again for well over 10 years. And the citizens' response to that evidence, and seeing how it matters for the small and medium-sized enterprises, for the local institutions, for local authorities, for local health boards, for community growers, for farmers, just cuts through all the nonsense and says, we just need to do this. What's, I think, also really important in terms of making sure this goes somewhere right now, again, referring back to Andy's speech yesterday, so this absolutely speaks to the delivery challenge and to bringing citizens together as collaborators in problem solving, as collaborators with government, with policymakers, with local institutions, in how we can get things done more effectively. This is a bit of a gift, I think, to the new administration as it comes in. Citizens' voices backing well worked through policy proposals, supported by real evidence of what works on the ground and what needs to shift and what governments can do to create the conditions for this to change. So I'm really excited that this will go somewhere, that government will act on citizens' voices. And I think, like Anna, I would love to see this bold and courageous approach to policy making embedded in government as a permanent fixture. I think the example that we've got here just shows why this would be an excellent idea. So thank you again from me. Thank you to all of the teams, people who welcomed and hosted our citizens so generously in all of their places, to our own teams, to Anna and my teams at the Food Foundation, Food Farming Countryside Commission, who do all the hard yards to make all this work. And thank you so much to citizens in the Citizens Advisory Council, who continue to be absolutely committed to being real allies in improving food systems, the food economies for all of us. Thank you.